Welcome to RC Engineering. Today we're going to do some track testing of the Sanwa radio system versus a Flysky radio system. We're going to use a Sanwa MT5 and we're going to compare it to a Flysky Noble Pro. Let's see how these two compare as far as feel, as far as best lap time, and also as far as consistency, as these are important characteristics for racing. There's a lot of info about these two radios out there, but there's not a lot of comparison directly between the two. So let's see how they stack up. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting information. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming up in the future, and stay tuned for a lot of content, not just race related, but other subjects as well. Let's get into the radio testing now. So let's quickly walk through the two radios. We're going to test on the Sanwa side. We're going to test an MT5. My road to the MT5 started earlier than that, but let's say it started with the KO EX1K1Y. I switched to a Futaba because I much preferred the ergonomics of the Futaba. Then I switched to an MT12S Sanwa because I preferred the overall radio performance, even though I found I gave up a bit on the ergonomics side. The performance was definitely there. Then I switched to an MT44 to get the lighter weight, better ergonomics. Wore that out. I got an M17. And from there I used that for a little while until I wanted to try the KO Next radio system. I wanted to try the lay down throttle, which was very interesting. I really enjoyed the radio, but the drawback with it is that nobody can drive your car because nobody's used to that radio. It takes a little while to get used to that throttle feel. But I did like the steering feel of it, I would say, even in comparison to the Sanwa. And to be able to be a little bit more universal, and I really do like the ergonomics of the MT44 and now the MT5. So I'm now back to a Sanwa, so I can swap radios with people. This has been modified. It has a LiPo in it, it has a wireless receiver and a little small charger so that I can do wireless charging of this, which I found was a great feature that I added to my M17, and I definitely wanted to carry that into the MT5. The Noble Pro feels a little different. Ergonomics are good. It feels heftier. You can definitely feel more weight in it. We'll weigh the two in a second, but you can feel that it's solid. Even an M17 doesn't have this solid feel that I was quite impressed with. The movable steering is an interesting feature. I guess best used every day for just storing it back into your radio bag. You might not always see it. Not sure how well it's going to show up in the video, but there's a little protractor underneath the screen that you can always set it back to exactly the same position. I like to run mine just a little below zero, slightly open, and so this becomes infinitely adjustable to your needs, and you just need to remember or make a mark, and you can always put it back to exactly the same position. The base is actually not part of the radio, which Noble users will know. This is actually just a separate power supply, and the radio itself has its own built-in battery. Snaps together very well, and probably see it now. It'll light up telling me that the power supply is actually charging the main radio. Let's get into the weighing of these. I'm not sure how well this is going to show up on the screen. Let me see if I can put this into the center, and hopefully that shows up. So the MT5 with the LiPo charger, everything, comes in at 433. A M17, I got a friend of mine to weigh his with the stickers on it, and as he runs it, and that came in at 511. So just for cross-reference information. And the Noble comes in at 550. It's a little heavier. You definitely feel it when you pick it up. It feels like it's got more heft to it, but it's very well balanced. It actually feels it's slightly bottom balanced, so it doesn't tip like the MT12 was famous for doing. There is a handle attachment that actually comes on the Flysky when you get it. It comes with also a cell phone holder, which you can remove. There's an aluminum bracket that's in the kit of parts so that you can just put the handle on if you want it. I didn't find I needed it, and that's an extra 30 grams just in case you were interested. I usually use a silicone wheel. The foam feels really good on both radios, but I find if I ever have to take my hand off, like when I was doing nitro and I would put my fingers back, I squeeze the foam hard, and I'd make a notch, and if I would put my finger back beside the notch, well, it would unnerve me. So I got used to a silicone wheel, and I actually really like it. Plus it's super easy to keep clean. Just give it a wipe. That comes in at 11 grams, so it's actually adds 9 grams to the foam, just in case anybody was ever interested. Receivers for the two radios are both relatively small. We'll weigh them in a second, but let me make one clarification. In the little teaser video that I put up, I spoke about the FGR4B receiver, which has an external antenna. It's the receivers that come with the one of the receivers that comes with the Pro. The other that comes with it is a large 8 channel, which probably wouldn't be very good for us in racing. But they offer these small FGR4S. This is the V2. I believe the V1 is exactly the same size. And I claimed that I was using the B receiver because I wanted to go into SSR mode with the Sanwa's SSR mode with the Flysky. But the Flysky is not compatible with the SSR mode. I need to make that correction. So I ended up using it just in regular digital mode, and therefore I used the built-in antenna receiver. The Flysky weighs in at 5.6 and the Sanwa weighs in at 6.9. So there's a little over a gram difference, but that's really nothing in the grand scheme of things. The footprint, I would give the Sanwa is probably about 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter narrower in this direction. So a very slightly smaller footprint for that extra gram. This is the setup that I used on my Sanwa. I used it in both vehicles tested. If I will go into the system mode, we'll go into bind, and we will see that it's set up in FH5. Telemetry is on, steering is set to SSR mode, and throttle is set to SHR mode, which are the normal modes for, the SHR is normal digital mode, and SSR mode is the advanced mode that's available in some servos to give a little bit better connectivity. You feel a little bit more connected as you're driving around. It's a mode that if your servo can handle it, I would definitely recommend, because it gives a slightly more enhanced feel as you're driving. So that's the Sanwa.
Welcome to Noble Pro.
And in the Noble Pro, let me switch models to show you also the touring car. And so this is what the main menu looks like when you turn it on. I'm going to go into the model menu and show you that channel definition is set to 2. A feature in the Flysky is you can determine how many channels you want to turn on. 2 being the fastest. It even says fast, so that you know that the frame rate becomes a little bit smaller the less information that it has to put into it. And then there's also radio frequency setup, which is an important setting. And here you'll see that it's set to one-way mode. You can set it up in two-way mode so that you will get information about the receiver. It'll tell you that the receiver is connected. It will tell you what the receiver voltage is, which is your BEC voltage most of the time. And it will also give you radio strength, radio signal strength. Because I'm in one-way mode at the moment, it's not showing up. It's just telling you what the transmitter is. It doesn't get anything back from the receiver. So a little bit like turning telemetry off on your Sanwa. Although on the Sanwa it doesn't affect the frame rate, on the Flysky it does. So you can see also that the menu has been cleaned up. I've taken out all the extra channels. I've just turned them all off so that they're not there, and only the information that I'm very interested in is there on the screen. Nice clean screen. All the information you need is there, showing you throttle, brake, and any offsets that you would have into it. You can see steering rates turned down to 95%. Throttle rate, full throttle, is set up at 100, and brake rate is turned down to 80. We'll get into that in a minute, the difference between the two radios. So before we get into the lap times, let me tell you a couple little differences that I needed to make in the radios. On the GT12, for steering curve, I typically run a lot of steering in my cars and then tune the steering curve negative exponential to get the steering feel that I want. I was running 24% on the Sanwa, and that was too high on the Flysky. I turned that down to 20% to get the right amount of feel. Then on the touring car, I'll run 14. For this setup, I have 14% curve, and with the Flysky, I only would run 12 to get the same amount of feel. Also, the GT12 doesn't require brakes. We typically run that at 100%. On the touring car, 17.5 on the tight indoor layout, I was running 70% brake on the in the touring for the Sanwa, and I had to turn that up to 80% on the Flysky to get the same amount of feel on the brakes. So that was an interesting difference. But now the real difference is it's all about lap times. So I started off with the GT12. I ran a couple packs, made sure that everything was right. Then I switched over to the Flysky. I ran it as two-way mode first, then I ran it into one-way mode, and then I switched back to the Sanwa to make sure that the track hadn't evolved and the car hadn't evolved. It didn't, so that was good. So the ABA testing proved that we had isolated and we were only working within the radio system. So let's get to the numbers. I started, as I said, with the GT12. I ran that. Hot lap was done in 11.29. Top 15, 11.48 with a 99.0 consistency. On a quiet track day, it was a Thursday, I was basically the only person there, so I could do runs by myself and didn't have to get caught up in any traffic. Then the two-way mode for the Flysky, I did an 11.30. Top 15 of 11.51 and a 99.1 consistency. Now the fast lap is basically identical. They're within like 4/1000, so let's call that quit. The top 15, the Flysky wasn't quite as good as the Sanwa, even though the consistency is 0.1 better. I will say that it did the hot lap up front, and then it didn't feel as fast, and I think that was partially me getting used to the radio. And to be honest, I was not disappointed, but I could feel a definite difference between the two radios at this point. I didn't feel as connected, and I had already started to make some ideas about the why of that. And without adjusting the car, I switched to one-way mode because that was the next test I wanted to do, because people are saying that it's making a difference. And sure enough, it did. Fast lap of 11.308, which was 100 slower than I went with the Sanwa. But the top 15 was an 11.42. So that's 6/100ths faster. And the consistency was a 99.1 as well. With the one-way mode, I felt a little bit more connected to the car, especially in the sweeper and in, like I said, that those two corners on the left side of the track where you're at partial throttle and you're balancing the car without a lot of steering input, at low steering inputs. I definitely felt a little bit more connected to the Flysky. It was quite a difference. I wasn't expecting there to be a big difference between two-way and one-way. I would compare that to running normal digital, say SHR in the Sanwa, to running in SSR mode. You just feel a little bit more connected, and that gives you a little bit more consistency. I won't say that it's going to make you faster, but it will definitely make you a little bit more consistent over the run. And going from two-way to one-way in the Flysky, I felt that. Then when I switched back to the Sanwa, I did a very, very similar run to my hot lap wasn't there anymore. I think I did like a 3.1, so 200ths off, and the top 15 was a 4.9, 11.49. So it was right on again for the consistency, and so there was a small win there for the Flysky, I would say. I slightly preferred that steering feel in the GT12. Now I was excited to get into the touring car. I went back on Saturday to do that test. A lot of traffic that day, so I couldn't really look at my consistency over my run. I'd have to stop, I'd have to move, I'd have to get out of the way. I was one of the faster cars on track, so there was a lot of people testing the new TTGT class that we're running. Some newbies, which is great for the hobby, but really didn't help me get anywhere on the consistency. So touring car hot lap was with the Sanwa was a 10.204. consistent top 15 of 10.370. Note that I only ran this in one-way mode for the Flysky because I'd already established that that seemed to be better, so I just started there on the touring car. And hot lap on the Flysky was 10.24, so 400ths down. And and consistency, top 15, was 10.32, so 500ths better there. And it seemed consistent across the board. I could go a couple of hundredths faster, not a couple of tenths, a couple of hundredths faster up front with the Sanwa. I did that repeatedly in all three cars. It was funny. I couldn't believe it that I couldn't do the hot lap within, and it was every run. Every time I put the Sanwa in, I was ever so slightly better on hot lap. But the top 15 consistency was always better with the Flysky. I'll put that down to the steering feel. Now with the touring car, I got to use the partial throttle, got to use quite a bit of brake on that layout. So it was very good to get a feel for the throttle. I will say that the Sanwa, I felt a little bit more connected to the throttle, especially in braking and transition from braking to steering. I felt a little bit more connected to the car. That might be my being used to it. The Flysky, although the lap times were there, the consistency was definitely there. I didn't like the feel of the throttle as much. I don't see it as a problem. It's, I think, just the ergonomics of the physical trigger are just slightly different. So there's maybe a little learning curve for me on there. But from the lap times and from the consistency I could do with both radios, I wouldn't say that either one has a severe advantage in either the steering or the throttle department. I preferred the feel on the Flysky steering. I preferred the throttle feel on the Sanwa. Just little subtleties in there. So the data shows that the Flysky wants to be in one-way mode. Set it to 2-channel, set it in one-way mode. I felt very connected to the car, very confident, and I could push right away with that. With the Sanwa SSR, if your servo will handle it, but this is the highest in the touring car, and this is the Sanwa in the GT12. So both handle SSR and handle it very well, and I think give a small advantage there over running just in regular digital mode. But even then, the Flysky in one way seemed to have an advantage over the steering of the Sanwa. So there you go. So some data, very similar. No big surprises, slightly different in feel, but the overall result is very similar. So the Flysky stood up very well to the Sanwa. It was good to be able to do this test in my own cars, on a track that I know, a layout that I know, conditions that I'm familiar with, to better isolate the two radios and to try to get to see which has an advantage or a disadvantage. Lap times being the ultimate test showed that they're very, very similar. It's going to just come down to car setup and driving preference. So there's no real advantage in one or the other. It's just going to come down to what's available to you and what you like, what you don't like. Let me know what you think. Give me your comments, any other questions, anything I've missed. Put that in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the RC Engineering channel, and we'll get up to some more testing very soon. Take care.